do now because the city of Portland is using PCEF dollars to plant trees. So how can we help support this effort through this cooling corridor study so that we can maximize not just what we're doing, but also the benefits of those tax dollars?
Do you want to go? Sure.
We are recording now.
I think, thank you for the question, Councilor Simpson. I think there are many different opportunities to link this work to what's happening out in communities already. This is setting Metro, making a statement of this is an important issue and that we will continue to work with the CO office and our work to begin implementing things that we can within the resources that we have. So this is raising the issue and then also making space for us to be engaging with our City of Portland and other partners to build on work that they're already doing. We don't have a grant program to be able to fund those kinds of things, but this could provide an opportunity to start exploring ways or looking for funding opportunities that are out there. There are some funding opportunities to implement. And so the team has been tracking those already as well to see if there's opportunity to apply for grants or support our local partners in applying for grants to advance some of this work.
I think that program, I'll take a picture of it. I'll share it with you all, but I think it was a direct city program. Like they actually had city trucks and folks were out there trenching and planting trees. So I don't think this was a direct grant program. I think this is the city just rolling trees out.
Right.
Hopefully not to the failure that they did the last time where all the saplings fried because nobody maintained them, which I think we could be some support there.
And Councilor Simpson, I appreciate the question. I also want to, there are two things. One of the main goals of this is to raise awareness, and the more awareness that both our governmental partners, but also our community partners have of this issue, and recognizing that heat actually, I'm sure you said this, but I can't remember, heat kills more people than any other type of climate emergency. That was news to me. And so the more that our community members know that heat is such a huge problem, the more they can advocate and apply for grants like through PCEF. While we might not have something exactly like that right now, maybe someday we will, but we are providing information to our community partners. And then I just wanted to be clear that we do have 3 questions that we would love, as you're letting us know what you think overall, I really hope that we heard that you're supportive, Councilor Simpson. We're looking to understand if your guidance is to move through the process that Jai described, asking for feedback from our committees. If there are other elements that are missing from this resolution, we can more eyes always provide better information. And we really want to be sure we're conveying the urgency of this issue. I mean, we didn't even get snow in Portland this year. And then the last is, as we are working through, should you give us the guidance to go ahead, as we're talking with our local governmental partners and working to see if we can get some feedback from the Committee on Racial Equity, are there specific questions that you have and that you'd like to have answered from those groups? Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. And I'll pose this as either 2 questions or 2 suggestions, depending on how you want to take them. The first question is maybe something in the resolution about coordination with Clark County, since they're in more or less the same heat island that we are, on a similar climatic experience. Or my question is, have we been coordinating? Are they thinking of doing something similar? And then the second question would be, since we all know that the news broadcast people always announce there's going to be a heat advisory, there's going to be a heat thing, is something about coordinating so that there's consistency on reporting when we have a heat watch or a heat advisory so that it goes out on the public media so that people are aware of this. Because a lot of people watch the weather and they always are announcing there's a dust advisory, there's a heat advisory, there's a cold advisory, whatever. So just that coordination, just to mention that we can, or our intent would be to coordinate with the other entities that are reporting on these kinds of threats. So those are You can answer you can answer as a question, or are we doing anything, or is that part of this? Whatever.
We have not coordinated with Clark County yet, but that is something that we can do in this next month, reaching out to them and kind of touching base on this idea. And as for your second question, I believe that heat advisories are triggered by certain temperature thresholds. So as soon as it reaches like 90, 95 degrees, that's when they send out those heat alerts to the region. So this resolution is more so symbolic, kind of garnering some public awareness of the issue, but it won't interfere with any of the heat alerts, heat watches, or things of that nature. And we've been coordinating with our public health partners at the counties to make sure that we don't interfere with we align with the dates that they have set and use for their heat season for reporting and monitoring practices that they do. So there is alignment there, and we've been kind of coordinating with them.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think, we're viewing this as a way to build muscle memory in the community that, we're at a point where every summer there's potential dangers, and that it's something that, every spring we should be starting to think about. Like, are we ready for heat season? Do we have the things in place that we need? Do we have our messages? Are we ready when there's extreme heat in the forecast? And just, getting people prepared. I remember when the first heat dome happened and seeing those temperatures like rising into the teens. As a teenager, I experienced that kind of heat in Las Vegas, and it was on like a family trip, and I was like, whoa, even though I'd grown up in LA, this is like such a huge difference in what it does to your body. And, it really worried me for how people would like not understand how there is a difference between, 99 degrees and 112 degrees or 113 degrees. And so, I'm viewing it as like this base layer that we just, every year we get accustomed to. It's like the Puxatani, the groundhog, every year. It's like every year, okay, it's that time of year again. Let's make sure we have the things in place. And hopefully that helps also boost and prime people to hear those messages that come through from our public health agencies.
Okay, Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Deputy President Wong. Well, this is really great work. And just super impressed by the due diligence to engage with as many kind of partners at the state level, locally, to coordinate the intention of what we want to do here. I think that's really special. So very well done. Additionally, I think as I'm hearing some folks on the council talk about like what does it necessarily mean for like community partners or other governments in terms of this, and I definitely see the value of like a regional action backed by research, helping like a nonprofit write a grant and allude to this kind of action that has been taken to also justify the work and validate and help them build momentum, even if it's outside of a grant program that we run, right? So I really see the opportunity for us to expand leadership in that area, and I think that's awesome. One of the things that I'm yearning for that I want to see more of is like, how does this coordinate with not just the affirmation and the action of heat, but the investments that we can make? And I think we make a lot of investments, some that are really obvious, some that are maybe not obvious in terms of heat mitigation. We talked about tree canopy. And so is there a way for us to be like, we want to dedicate planting more trees with our nature neighborhood grants, and we encourage people to do that as a result of this action. I think about the life jackets that we give out to families to participate in the water safely, to like cool down safely. So as a part of our like communications and the messaging that we give, I don't want to just like share with folks the affirmation and the research and the action that we're taking, but also some of those concrete examples of how we want to address this long term. So to look at question number 3, I would be really concretely wondering how can MPAC, how can CORE, how can those committees give us advice around the investments that Metro directly can make and or connect it with our with our environmental justice kind of a North Star for the council and how that can maybe add a little bit more context there.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I'm very supportive of this moving forward. I think that looking at the way that this region has responded to heat, we have had multiple approaches depending on what part of the region and frankly, what kind of jurisdiction you live in. And so to have a unified statement of the challenge, but hopefully also starting to resource communities is important. When I think through what could be added in the whereas clauses, I would like to see a listing of all of the evacuation notices that have covered the urban area. You know, I was in, I live right on the border between the yellow and the orange line of the evacuation zones from the 2020. So that speaks to me very clearly that there are folks who live in an urban area, and in 2020, luckily, we hadn't seen the LA fires yet. So we couldn't really imagine what forest fires in neighborhood look like, but now we've seen them. So I think a very clear listing of areas where people have already had to contemplate what it means to leave home in a forest fire when it encroaches on urban area. The other place that I think we could work with this resolution is in thinking about our metro properties as a shelter, as refuse, as a network of buildings, most of which are not adequately set up for welcoming the public. And even if they are set up to welcome the public, are not themselves adequately cooled. So I do think it's important to recognize our own built government infrastructure is not up to par for the kind of heat that we experience. And then lastly, I think it is important to note that climate change is really affecting animals and animal habitats and where animals want to burrow or fly to. But we have some animals within our care that cannot leave because they live at our zoo. And we should be resourcing the zoo to be better caretakers. They're great caretakers, but have all the resources they need to try and meet the animals at the habitat temperature that they'd like.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for bringing this to us. It's evolved quite a bit since we met with you in November, and I think the work is impressive. I agree with the idea of declaring a crisis. And I want to make sure that as we do that, we are clear that we, Metro as an organization, will take intensive steps to mitigate and help our partners prepare. So that gets to your second question, which is what's missing. I would like to see in this a directive from the council that we consider climate impacts, either actual climate degradation or conditions that make changes in climate difficult for human or animal or plant survival in our region. And ask each of our departments when they bring significant program changes, maybe during their budget, or when they bring significant policy recommendations to us, that they include a rigorous evaluation of what their recommendation how it will impact climate change. On that line, it may not have been an exhaustive list, but your list of metro policies that already are interconnected with climate missed our urban growth management report, which I think has a clear and significant direct connection with climate, the deterioration of climate in this region and how we might mitigate against the effects on humans and animals. I think those can be added, but I think it's important that we lead by example in taking this issue to heart in every significant decision we make on program or policy. That's to me what a crisis means.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Jai and team, thank you so much for the work. We're real excited to hear this resolution more formally when it comes back. And yeah, just really excited for this body of work. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our next presentation, which is on supportive housing services reform performance metrics. We will now turn it to Metro's housing staff to provide an overview of the performance metrics the Metro Council endorsed through the SHS Reforms Work Plan in December. Today we have Yesenia Delgado, Division Director, and Liam Frost.
Thank you.
And Liam is also our newly appointed Housing Director. Formally, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Mr. So direct.
Housing Director Liam Frost, he, him, his pronouns, and thank you all for your support. I appreciate it. And with me is.
Yeah, good morning, councilors. I'm Yesenia Delgado. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the SHS Division Director with Metro's Housing Department.
First slide, please. So we're here today to give you a brief update on some of the work that was initiated by the reform work plan that you all approved back in December. We're specifically going to be talking about performance tracking, and that's just an umbrella term for goals, KPIs, key performance indicators, and then also what we've introduced as a new concept, key environmental indicators as well. So we're just going to provide you with a brief status update this morning. And next slide, please. And this is exactly what we're going to be talking about. Yesenia is going to take the first half of this presentation. I'll take the second half, and then we'll get into some Q&A, and then we can move on to your next agenda item. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? So in order to ground us in terms of where we've been with our data system and how we've evolved over the years to arrive to this point, I just wanted to share a bit more context on the Metro SHS 2020 work plan that provides really a comprehensive plan for how we're going to implement the SHS funds. It serves as a governing document for program implementation, addressing how the supportive housing services revenues will be administered to achieve the goals described in the ballot measure. The work plan includes, 10-year regional goals and outcome metrics. Some of the regional goals that we've discussed at length with you all include the 5,000 and 10,000 goals. It also includes other goals and requirements like the 75-25 financial split that indicates that 75% of the funds will go to population A and 25% will go to population B. And there's also these additional goals in there around housing stability, equitable service delivery, engagement and decision-making. So this is really providing the SHS goals an additional context for how we implement the program and what are the certain areas that we should prioritize. A couple pieces of context to note was that these goals and metrics were all drafted in 2020. The landscape was very different back then in terms of what we had. There was some projecting forward, but I think there was always an understanding that some of these goals and we would need to further refine some of these metrics and KPIs and where we're headed with them. Because in this work plan that I'm mentioning where you see all the goals, just a few pages later, you see the eligible expenses for SHS. And we have things in there like shelter and transitional housing. And as you can see in our initial goals, we didn't really have any shelter or transitional housing goals or specific KPIs around that. which is why, you know, that is one of the reasons why it has led us to this conversation, to ensure that the broader goals and the main vision for SHS are all geared towards the continuum of care services that we provide and not just towards certain of the program areas that we fund. So for the first few years of SHS, the main way that Metro was able to report on these goals was via the quarterly and annual reports that we got from the counties. These were, for the most part, these paper electronic file reports I would get from the counties. The data that we were able to then share out and report progress on was pretty static, and it wasn't as interactive or as intricate as it could be as we have now. So that really kind of sets the framework for our current data dashboard and how we were sharing data on our website that communicated out progress. So that context, coupled with recommendations coming from our own Metro auditor on how we streamline data governance and calling us into how we have more clear and transparent and quantifiable SHS goals, really led the Metro Housing Department over the last couple of years to intentionally build up our regional data infrastructure, you know, hired some great staff that could do really great data work on analysis, evaluation, and those sorts of things. Coupled with the data sharing agreement that we now have that provides us access to de-identified and disaggregated data, really positions us as the Metro Housing Department's team to be able to track data in a much more intentional way, conduct analysis, validation, and then be able to report out that progress to the broader community. Additionally, all of this data system improvement work that we did, and meeting with the Metro Council's President's Work Group that got stood up last spring of 2025, where they also provided additional goals and recommendations for where SHS should head in the future. All of those multifaceted bodies of work led us to the SHS reform work plan that you all passed last December, where you all endorse new KPIs and KEIs and goals for the next 5 years. That would really build upon the progress that we've made, you know, already achieving a lot of these 10-year goals that we've set forth, but also applied some of the lessons learned in terms of where we want to orient the system for the next 5 years. And if we go to the next slide, this just provides a quick overview of the different reform actions that are that were passed last December that are intended to improve the regional system through streamlining oversight, accelerating coordination, compelling the regional system of care to deliver better and lasting outcomes for people experiencing homelessness. So you see here the governance, which is intended to streamline the 2 oversight committees that we had and have better connection points to Metro Council. The regional investment, which provided a framework for how we will spend the regional investment fund and clear roles and responsibilities and reporting for that fund. And admin rules that really then codify our policies into programmatic standards and definitions to ensure that the fund is being implemented in the same way across the region. There's a lot of interdependence between all of these different reform items. And the box that you see here in green is the KPIs and goals, which is really what we'll focus today's presentation on. And as you can imagine, as we are talking about these KPIs and 5-year goals, these really have a big influence and interdependence within all these reform concepts. So the new committee will really be tracking performance against these KPIs and goals. The admin rules will further codify what we mean when we set these KPIs and goals and apply definitions and standards for how we move through these goals. So landing this body of work around KPIs and goals is critical to moving forward the rest of the reforms that you see here. Yeah, and the only other thing I'll note here is that tracking performance against these KPIs and goals is important, but almost just as important as policymakers is being able to assess and analyze the data coming through so that those data trends can inform some of the decisions that we want to make around streamlining and making better decisions for the fund moving forward. Next slide, please. Yeah, and as we walk y'all through just a little bit more of where we're headed with the goals and KPIs, the the data points that you all have endorsed, the staff feasibility assessments that we're currently running. We just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page in terms of the definitions and what they mean. So when we talk about goals in today's presentation / in the reform work plan, we're really talking about the change that we're hoping to see at a really broad high level. So a lot of these goals that you'll see currently in our Metro SHS work plan are things like the 75-25 split. These are some broad goals that have really oriented how the system gets implemented and where we choose to like prioritize certain investments. We then have indicators that are high level data points or metrics that are quantifiable and measure to track progress over time. So these are data points and data that we could see over certain periods of years to see how we are increasing, improving, where we have some work to do. And then finally, outcomes, what you see here are the specific measurable benefits from certain activities and or outputs. So we'll walk you through in the SHS reform work plan, the different goals, the sub outcomes to those goals, the indicators, and then there's some more work to do on the metrics that will report up to each indicator, but we just definitely wanted to make sure to start there and fill you in terms of where that work is headed. And if we go to the next slide. This is just sharing a little bit more in terms of like these definitions that I just covered and what they will mean for our work. So as you can see here, the KPIs standing for key performance indicators really track the performance of the regional homeless services system. So these are the things that we can actually control for in the system. And the other thing that we have learned as a follow-up to the president's work group and just engagement with investment parties is that it is critical that these KPIs build from the regional program and the goals in context. So there will be a through line that you'll see between the KPIs, the KEIs, and the goals. You know, the KPIs were also, we took the feedback that we heard from folks at the president's work group last year, but also some of the other feedback that we've done with other invested parties that we worked with and our county partners. The KPIs that we'll walk through today are focused, measurable, and really tied to accountability so that we can track progress and where things are going. And we've also worked to align them with the federal, state, and other local funding sources. So as you can imagine, the regional homeless system of care is composed of multiple different funding streams. And when we're not trying as much as we can to speak the same language, then it just becomes really disruptive to our implementing partners, but also the service providers who have to manage all these different funding sources. The KEIs, or the key environmental indicators, are really monitored, and these are contextual factors that the homeless service system does not control, but these contextual factors do have an influence on our homeless services system. So these are things like the inflow, the number of people coming into homelessness. So even though that we won't track them per se, it is important to be able to monitor them and share how they correlate and intersect with the system that we're trying to build and the impact that it's having. And then finally, like I've shared, we have the new 5-year goals that we are working to implement. And then we'll have an interim goal as we're kind of finalizing our 5-year goals and where those are headed to ensure that, you know, we're providing clear direction to the regional system in terms of what to prioritize and what we're building towards. We go to the next slide. This slide here just has the specific key performance indicators that you all have endorsed, the things that we are looking to be tracking over years in our system. And what we're looking at here is eviction preventions, or otherwise known as homeless prevention. So these are the number of folks that might be at risk of losing their housing, but with some support, they will be able to like stay in their housing. I think what the data is really clear on is that this is such an important intervention as part of the continuum care of services, because it is a lot more trauma informed to keep someone housed, but also long term, it saves the system money to just be able to provide those 1 or 2 months of rent assistance that a household might need, instead of waiting for them to experience homelessness and then have to triage the system and go through all the other steps. The other set of KPIs that you'll see on here is shelter. And this would include both emergency shelter, but also transitional housing. And you see here that we would be tracking utilization rates, which I know has been a question that counselors have had in the past around like, hey, we're funding X amount of beds. How are they being utilized? It will also, the KPIs under this section will also include the number of individuals served, the number of shelter units that we have, how many of those people that are engaging in SHS funded shelters move into permanent housing, or perhaps other positive placement outcomes. So maybe they go into a family reunification process or a transitional housing placement. So we'll be able to track how people move from one component of the system to the other. We'll also track all of our housing placements for all of our different housing funding programs that we have. So including permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and then we have some other unique housing programs that aren't quite either of these programs. We're kind of in the mix. It's an additional flexibility that SHS affords us. That, for example, households that might need a bit more than rapid rehousing, but less than permanent supportive housing, that's what would get captured there. We'll also be tracking housing retention rates. So after someone gets housed, at the 6, 12, and 24 months, we'll be able to see if they are still placed and what characteristics are making it so that they are able to successfully stay housed. And then as a request from you all to identify also some regional coordination and alignment KPIs and goals. This is really speaking to, as we build out the regional system of care, what does it look like to like track that and have some indicators that speak to the progress that we have here. Metro staff has been reviewing some of the work that came out of the president's work group last year around some of those recommendations for some goals and KPIs, perhaps around governance, around regional policies and standards, contract alignment across service providers. So we are currently assessing some of those goals, and we'll come back to the Regional Policy and Oversight Committee and you all to further finalize the KPIs for the regional coordination and alignment section. So that wraps up a little bit more of information on the KPIs, and I'll pass it over to Liam to do the KEIs.
Thanks so much, Yesenia. And I kind of just want to take a moment to ground us again in one of the last things that Yesenia mentioned there, which is more process oriented. One of the key words on this slide right now is endorsed. So Metro Council endorsed this language, has endorsed the KEIs and the goals. We'll be bringing that to RPOC as a priority. So coming to you today, we're timing it so that we can effectively onboard some of these new members so that when we get the committee up and running, we can get the approval for some of these proposed or endorsed KPIs, goals, and KEIs, bring it back to Metro Council, and then go off to the races and implement them as soon as we can. Moving on. Well, one last thing, actually. I just want to make a very explicit note that the terms that we've included in the work plan that were endorsed last December were terms of art. They're high level. And so we're in the process right now with our staff. We actually have a meeting today at 1 o'clock, and we're going to be meeting with county staff to reconcile some of the more technical terms. So it's likely that when this comes back to Metro Council, it will reflect some of that reconciliation that is happening right now in real time. Next slide, please. So these are the draft endorsed key environmental indicators. This is the first slide of 2. This is the comprehensive list, such as it is. This is a personal priority of mine. It's really important for 2 reasons for me. One is that we need to be clear with every person who's a stakeholder in the general public and the media what SHS is and what it isn't. It isn't designed to fix living wage issues. It isn't designed to fix the very low federal disability benefits that folks receive. It isn't designed to fix Medicare, Medicaid. It is, as I mentioned in the last work session, necessary but not sufficient to end homelessness. That doesn't mean that these data points are not critical for us to understand. They're a key understanding of what is impacting the system. For example, the top key environmental indicator right there is total number of evictions, and they've shot up in the last month to pre-pandemic levels. More than pre-pandemic levels, actually. So that's an indicator that somewhere down the road, 3 months from now, we are going to see more people entering homelessness, and we have to be clear-eyed about that fact. In the future, my hope is that the system can be more responsive to some of these indicators that are coming our way. But right now, they're really important to highlight as contextual indicators. I think if I'm going to add a third thing, It's speaking to Councilor Gonzalez's dream, which is to have this committee as an advocacy group to advocate towards these other systems to ensure that we are reducing the number of people who are being forced into homelessness. And I think we can get there with this new committee. Next slide, please. This is the second slide on the endorsed key environmental indicators. I've mentioned this to you a couple of times before, but it's worth mentioning again. I expect this set of data points to evolve much more rapidly than the others. It is a new area that we're exploring. We want to be explicit about that because we want to welcome new ideas around this. Some of the other ideas that have come up in past work sessions with council is to sort of combine some of these data points into inflow. I think it's part of Councilor Wong, Councilor Gonzalez's resolution that you'll be discussing next. That's something we'll want to be able to fold up as well. But what my hope here is that this makes sense to you, that this is a rational way of approaching some of our work and a rational way of communicating where SHS fits in this inequitable and unequal economy that folks are experiencing right now. Next slide, please. So what we did here was to take out all of the associated outcomes with the goals that were presented to you in the work plan last December so that we could be very clear on what the 3 goals for the next 5 years currently are as endorsed by Metro Council. Again, I'm using that word endorsed. This could be subject to change depending on how the RPARC weighs in on this and then also how Metro Council eventually weighs in on these goals. But what you approved or endorsed in December was reduce the length of time people experience homelessness, increase the efficiency and effectiveness in housing placements and service connections, and then thirdly, ensure housing stability and retention for people placed in the housing. What that reflects is making sure that people spend the least amount of time possible experiencing the trauma of homelessness and therefore needing a greater array of services to address their needs. And also getting taxpayer value so that we're building a system that we can be proud of. And then third, ensuring that folks are not cycling in and out of homelessness, but rather escaping it permanently with stability and a chance to thrive for them and their families. Down below, you'll see the interim 18-month goal, subject to change again. The no net loss of housing placements that are funded by SHS. I mean, every day there's new news about how the federal government or HUD is proposing new rules. And so even, best case scenario, those rules are in alignment with our goals. The fluctuation and the volatility of it all makes it very unpredictable. At worst, it could completely undermine some of our goals. That dynamic means that our North Star for the next couple of years means that nobody loses their housing who've been placed in using SHS funding. Next slide, please. And we only have a few more slides to go, just to let you know. So the current status of all this, oh, sorry, I missed that. I wanted to provide you with some examples of the outcomes I had mentioned. If we put them all on slides, I think it would have made up 4 to 5 slides with the associated goals and outcomes. But I wanted to give you an example here of what we're working on with our county partners. When I say verbally, do you remember those X's in our one-on-one meetings? Well, here they are. X% of people and or households seeking services are connected to appropriate services within X months. We're currently working with our county partners to baseline our current collective standards so that we can be aggressive and set those outcomes to get to the point where we are building a more efficient system. Reducing the time that people are connected to services means that people will not experience the trauma of homelessness for longer periods of time and then necessitate a broader set of services or interventions. The third outcome there as an example for goal 3 is that stability, permanently housed for 3 years. Again, we want the right percentage of people in households that both reflects the baseline and is aggressive and ambitious beyond that baseline. So that's the work we're doing currently with our county partners. And again, we expect to come back to the RPARC, got to use an American accent for that, and then back to Metro Council for final approval. Next slide, please. So as our staff, some of whom are in the room today, are working towards, the KPIs are all feasible. We're collecting that data thanks to the data sharing agreement that we finally got to. There's a lot of other rich data in there that we will want to present to you and use, but these are the key points that you'll be able to track over time on a longitudinal basis to see how we're doing. Again, the KEIs, it's a new field for us, but we're very confident that we'll be able to provide ongoing data. I think one of the complications I want to flag for you right now is that some of that data is only available annually. Some of it's available quarterly. And so figuring out the frequency with which we update that data is something that we'll be doing as a housing department. And again, I've mentioned the draft goals subject to change. The housing department feels really confident in these goals right now. But again, the RPark and Metro Council will be the final deciders. Before I ask, I'm actually going to finish on the timeline. Let's move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So here's the timeline in front of you, starting with last December endorsing the KPIs. We're currently engaged with our own staff, with county staff, to really get ready for the RPark onboarding and those meetings. The onboarding is critical. If we don't do a good enough job in the onboarding, then those meetings are going to drag and we're going to take too much time in getting to work. So I want to reassure you that that's a high priority for us right now. And then we will be coming back, hopefully with some members of the RPark committee themselves, to council for approval of the KPIs, KEIs, and goals. And then by the end of this calendar year, we will have a dashboard reflecting all of this. I do want to take the privilege and opportunity to thank the team that has been working on this diligently. These are the folks that read hundreds of pages of reports from the counties, do the analysis, synthesis, and they've just been going gangbusters over the last couple of months and will continue to. So I want to thank Yvette Perez-Chavez, Chris Berg, Daisy Quinones, Hunter Belgard, Marissa Gutierrez, and Lizzie Cisneros for their work. They are the engine of oversight and accountability for us. You don't get to see them too much, and I just want to take a moment to thank them for their work. And that concludes our presentation. We'll take some questions, and I also know that this dovetails into your agenda item too, Councilor Wong, Councilor Gonzalez.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Yesenia. Let's start with questions for staff on this item. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Deputy President Wong. There are two things that I kind of want to ask about that I think help also tap into some of the common themes from the council that I think as we were working on the work plan in December and now trying to land a plane with this new oversight committee. So first, I just want to say incredible work. Like, there's no question. I'm very impressed and very grateful for the work that you and the housing team have done. So the first is just this general sense of like aspirational goals versus SMART goals. And I'm SMART as in like the acronym of the measurable, actionable, not trying to say that some goals are not SMART. And I think that this kind of stems from the origin of the measure and what we maybe in our hearts think that it's supposed to do was like end homelessness or do other things. And so I think like I continue to be in this place of like SMART versus aspirational goals. And Liam, I really appreciate you talking about like we need to talk, this measure does not address living wages. It doesn't address structural affordability. And so that is just like one high level thing that I see constantly coming up at the council. So I want to get what is your take on that question in relation to what you're presenting for the next 5 years? So that's question number one. So let's start with that one, and then I'll ask my next question later.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It really reminds me of, I think, the same questions and themes that were coming up last year in the President's Work Group, like this balance of setting aspirational goals, but then also trying to be realistic with what the current system can do with the current funding structures that we have. And I think what came out of the President's Work Group was really a recommendation to draft what they called like a potential SHS vision statement or a mission statement that was the more aspirational things. I could send you some of the recommendations that came out of there, but another way to frame that was kind of like the North Star that I think kept coming up last year of like, what is SHS going toward and what can we shoot to be like a bit more ambitious. That's not just related to like where we're at with the goals. But the goals that you see here presented are really specific to what SHS can control and does have influence and impact over. So that's why you see those key performance indicators, those metrics that we shared with you, all rolling up to the same goals that we wanted to ensure that we do have control and some sort of influence over aligning how long people are experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
How can we increase the efficiency once they do enter the system to ensure that they get placed into the right program category? And then how do they retain their housing? So I think if we wanted to continue to unpack the aspirational side of it, perhaps looking into what could be like a vision statement or some additional other goals that are more different than perhaps the ones that we have identified today.
Thanks.
I'll only add, Councillor, that, you know, you might have noticed that I didn't use the word aspirational as I was talking. I used the words aggressive, ambitious. The timeline, as we mentioned at the end there, coming back in August, the counties are going through the budget process right now and have a much better sense of how they're baselining. And that, I think, is going to be really important in terms of practical impact and how we build these goals and how we're realistic about where we're starting from and where we can get to. Because the last thing that I want to do in this new position is set a goal that I know that we won't be able to meet. But I do want to be aggressive and I do want to be ambitious.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean, I think there's also the like argument that people can make that I think is fair, that if we don't aim to be aspirational, then this kind of determines our destiny. You know what I mean? So it's this weird cycle that I just want to be mindful to not get caught in that trap, because I think maybe we did in 2020 and it's created a misalignment of expectations and outcomes. So that's number one. Thank you for that. The second is like, I'm stuck in this duality of what I'm seeing are the good work that you're putting forward, because I see a lot of it is like measuring the performance of the system, which is incredible and important. But when I am talking to a community member or one of my neighbors, like people aren't really motivated by the system. The machine is working better, right? Like let's unpack that. And I think what I need, and this might be not so much a measurement of how the system needs to work better, but as elected leaders, for the story that we tell and the way that we connect with people, I think that there needs to be a more like a human component. And maybe it's the same data with a different vantage point. Example, like how long does it take for a person to wait for a bed? How long are they working with a caseworker before a voucher is available?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and really putting it human dignity centered first.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a duality there that I'm struggling with, because our job as an oversight and as the collectors of SHS and as the primary body is to make the system as efficient and strong as possible. But I don't think people are like, hearts and minds aren't moved by a system. They're moved by people, and the people that they see in Old Town or in their neighborhood in Forest Grove that are suffering. And so how can we find a way to balance that? Or maybe that is in all the other slides that didn't make it.
Yep.
So when I think about how I want to be aspirational, I want to think about how we center that human nature in that. And I'm not saying you're not doing that, but.
No, I really appreciate the question. A couple of things to unpack there. And Georgia, if you wouldn't mind going to slide 11, feel free to take your time. I think there's a communications aspect to what you're talking about. And I also think there is a data aspect. And I'll start with the communications piece of it. I think at Metro, our fundamental job is to understand the region and to represent what is going well or not so well on a regional basis, which means aggregating each county who are implementing partners right now. I think we could do a much better job of communicating how each county is doing separately. We'll have our own regional dashboard, but what does that mean to somebody in Forest Grove, for example? And I think we're obligated to provide that information as well. I think, could you go to the next slide, please, Georgia? I think I've got a different slide deck.
Yeah.
Next one. Sorry. Next one, and I think that it is actually the next one. I apologize. Yeah, so if you see the top right here, Councillor, you mentioned, how long does it take for somebody to get a voucher? This is basically what we're trying to get at right here. Is
Yeah, for
the
sure.
number of people, how long are they waiting? And what is an aggressive timeline to say it's the average is 6 months? How do we get to 3 months? And that's the kind of question that I want this Regional Policy and Oversight Committee to ask. How are we going to reduce these times for people to access the services they need? My hope then is that we have experts at the table who can say, well, actually, this kind of intervention is more effective with this population. And then we're really getting into it. But I'm hoping that this speaks exactly to your question.
For sure. I think you're right. It does. And I saw that and I thought it was good. And it was like, I still think the question was worth asking.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's a even great, and I know you kind of made up numbers, 6 months to 3 months. And like, are those, what numbers, how do we determine if 3 months is good or not, right? So I think that is also something that I'm so curious to dive, and I think this RPOC group will give us, hopefully, this platform to engage much deeper and understand. And I think we're acknowledging that we're going to be entering the second phase of SHS that is going to have much less state and federal money to help us. And so I'm hoping that the questions we ask ourselves are not going to be just like, well, if we put more money into it, then it can be better. Because I think we are also finding that, well, maybe we need to work with health share to change this, and that would be significantly better. Or we just have to change the regulation or the system. And if we find ways to be like, well, then how do we get that 3 months to 1 month? And then like, actually come up with the policy items that we need to work on, I think that would be incredible, at least for me, in terms of feeling like the fruitful work that we can do.
Well, Councillor, I think you've been really consistent over the last few years as I've gotten to know you around, well, what are we comparing this to? And I think we've always run into a compared to what issue, and we've always thought about, well, should we compare ourselves to San Antonio? Should we compare ourselves to Houston or San Francisco? Texas shout out there for Councillor. Houston. But I really think that the compared to what conundrum should be answered by how are we doing right now and how can we improve on that? And we haven't done that baseline assessment, which is what we're engaged with the counties on right now.
Yeah, one step at a time. Thank you.
Councilor Lewis?
Sure, thank you so much. I think that this discussion, Liam, you're right. There's a communication challenge, and I think it's a kind of cart and horse or chicken and egg situation, because I think we have plenty of the stories to tell on the individual level, and where government for so long has not invested is at the systems level. So actually telling the story of what it looks like to have a non-existent or broken system is the story that we need to actually shine the spotlight on. Because we have so many stories of success of people who have really struggled and found resolution one way or another. But where we don't put a spotlight is when we have over 100 providers and somebody can go to every single door and still have to introduce themselves every single time, fill out the same form dozens of times and still receive no help. So those are the stories that we need to be more upfront in telling alongside these KPIs. The one place where I think the environmental indicators didn't quite hit for me is the totality of the funds outside of SHS available for context. I understand why that's not going to be tracked as an indicator, but I think it is an important thread not to lose that it is the environment that we're swimming in, and that we need somewhere in that environmental assessment to show to council and to our stakeholders what other funds are out there for each of the 3 counties for serving this population, so that people can understand in total what the efforts are cumulatively.
Thank you. I agree with both points. To your second point, I'll choose my words carefully, but we are making some headway with our county partners on that piece in our work sessions, specifically yesterday in the meeting. So we have some momentum on that second piece.
I would hope you are, because if they're not willing to share that information, we can very easily go through the budgets and put it together ourselves. But I would hope that they would be willing to bring forward that into the spirit of collaboration.
That
And if
would-
their budgets are too hard to read, they might want to look in the mirror.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just maybe add, we are making progress, and I will note that the reason why you don't see this as a KEI is because that is a metric that was actually identified in the 2020 Metro SHS work plan. So it's been, I think it's called like funds leveraged by the system or something. It's been something that the oversight team has worked from the beginning to try and implement, but as Liam shared, it's just complicated because there's so many different funding sources. And then sometimes it's not even the counties, like sometimes the COC provides direct funds to service providers. So getting an actual picture of everything has turned to be a bit more complicated than I think we initially thought, or when you all thought when you put that metric in there. But I just wanted to affirm that it is a priority. It actually isn't on here because it's already in the work plan. And as Liam shared, it's just been like a constant iteration to be like, how can we get better at sharing the data that we do have across all the leverage funding sources?
Great, thank you. And yet the direct award is a complication. I understand that. Yeah.
Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for this presentation. I wanted, if we could, Georgia, to go back to the slides and particularly look at I think it's the KPI and KEI slides, which I think, Liam, you said was 11 or 12.
I think I got my numbers wrong, but
I wasn't looking for, I'm not looking for the same slide you were. I'm looking for the one that came up that you didn't want.
Let's start with slide
11, I think.
Just a minute, Counselor, thanks.
Of course. Well, I don't see what I'm looking for. KEIs, I do know that at one point you had KEIs of population. And you had separated references to what I think were a reference to population A and on a different slide reference to population B. And my question around that is, do we have the same definition of population A and population B between Metro and the 3 counties at this time? Or is there work needed to do on that?
Thank you, Councilor Nolan. Yeah, I would definitely say that we have the same definition across all 3 counties. I think what we've learned a couple years ago is that there was slight words that were maybe being implemented different, but we all had the same definitions, and we worked in the last year and a half to ensure that the same words have the same proxies across the region. And I think that really showed in this last regional report that got presented to you all last week, I believe that was.
Great. So we're operating under the same definitions of A and B. That's progress. Thank you. Another question I had is, I love the framing that Councilor Gonzalez made of focusing on the human being that is the center of our work, the human being, the human beings. I'll add, though, that if we also focus on efficiency, it allows us to be useful and productive with more human beings if we can reduce the cost per service for an individual human being. And I wanted to know where that might get captured. Do we capture somewhere, and I think it might be KPIs, but maybe you would place it somewhere else, the cost of each rent assistance for a household, the cost of a shelter placement, the cost of a permanent supportive housing placement?
So, Councilor Nolan, thank you very much for the question. The cost and the budgets of each county are captured regularly anyway. We're not introducing new methodologies around that. Should council want us to wrap that up into the dashboard, which really where this is all going to be ending up in anyway, we can do that. But I'm going to ask Yesenia to talk about the budgets that we already capture through our regular processes beyond these reforms.
Yeah, so just the financial processes that we've used to monitor the financial health of the program. The counties submit both a budget at the beginning of a fiscal year that indicates how they will spend down their dollars. As part of their budget, they have to indicate for each of the program areas how much they will spend there. And because in the last couple of years, with help with our finance manager, we've been able to connect both the budget and the reports so that they're speaking the same language. We could directly look at how much is spent for rapid rehousing, for example, or permanent supportive housing, and then connect that over to the placements or the ongoing sustained households. It's not perfect math in the sense of I can give you averages and I can give you ranges for like these intervention programs, given the outcomes and placements that we saw. This is how much it's looking that it is to like support people and like back into some averages that way. But I think we still have some more work to do there. But I do know that we're moving in the right direction by at least ensuring that our financial reporting and our programmatic reporting are speaking the same terms and we can run some of that analysis.
If I might follow up, Mr. Chair. So we've talked about having a goal of 75% of funds being spent to help people who are in population A. So to measure that, we have to know who's in population A and what services they're getting, right?
Yeah, that's right. And we do currently have that data. So for each of the program types, we could share with you how many of those households are population A and B. And then the report connects back to the financial report to see how much was spent in that area. And there's a methodology to indicate where we're at in the 75-25 split.
Great. And what I'm really looking for, Mr. Chair, if I might, is how we use this, how we kind of energize this data so that we and our partners in the counties can use it to explore what are the best practices to meet access, quick turnaround in access to shelter, or quick turnaround in access to supportive housing, or eviction prevention by rent a system. If we can study how different approaches to those services have the success rate they have and the cost they have, we can collectively make the best decisions about how the funds are spent to help the most human beings.
Councilor Nolan, that's exactly what I expect this committee to be deliberating on. In the work plan that was approved by Metro Council in December, the population A and population B subject is a priority. Metro Council has asked for it to be discussed and deliberated on by this new council. And again, I fully expect these aspects, cost, efficiency, and outcomes to be discussed at this committee, and which will then come back to Metro Council as well. So I think what you are requesting is about to happen.
I look forward to it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. First of all, general comment. First of all, I appreciate all the hard work that's gone on. It is not easy, and you've done a great job of trying to corral some very disparate cats here over the past several years. And as I've said before, we didn't have a complete idea of the complexity of the problem when we first started this out. So it's been a big learning curve. One of my main points, and I'll have two questions, but one of my main points is that the RPOC, and I've stressed this before, needs to understand that, for example, we approved KPIs. These are baseline KPIs. They may not be the final KPIs. They may not be the only KPIs. And I hope that RPOC realizes that they're going to be charged with adapting this process on the fly as it goes forward, assuming it goes forward, and making sure it goes forward. And that there may be modifications, tweaks, and refinements as we go on. Because there is no handbook. At least I've checked Powell's. There's no housing services for dummies that I've seen, but maybe I missed it. At any rate, my two questions are, one is related to, and I think the choice of KEIs was somewhat missed. I would have called them key external indicators because as an environmental scientist, I would think of environmental, for example, are we going to be tracking the populations at risk in environmental areas like heat deserts or heat islands or areas that are subject to asthma and stuff like that. I don't see that in there. I'm just wondering if that's something that might be considered. These are more external factors to me than environmental factors, which have to do with contamination and brownfields and so forth, things like that. And the other question is, I looked through there and I don't see any key performance indicators that will allow us to particularly assess the impacts or the success we're having with the youth cohort. And the reason I ask that is because obviously we know that how the youth cohort experiences homelessness is a fairly strong indicator of how they will go through the rest of their lives. And they're not groups that we can measure with housing placements because they usually don't own houses. So at any rate.
Councilor Rosenthal, I first want to thank you for your ongoing advocacy for homeless youth. There are a population who are especially vulnerable to the vicissitudes of homelessness. To try and raise any funding for that population has been historically very challenging and difficult. So I want to really appreciate your ongoing advocacy. As I mentioned earlier, the KEIs are going to be subject to evolution. One, we can add every system that we want in here. We can add the family system as well. And I think with your encouragement, we will do that. We can track those numbers relatively easily. The other piece to the KPIs and the KEIs, we are going to be tracking disparities as well, both in terms of the system, because we can improve the system and address disparities within the system, but also those contextual indicators as well for folks with different identities and backgrounds and why we are seeing those disparities. And then how as a system can we address those? So that overlay, as well as the different systems, will give us a much better sense of who we are serving, how we're serving them, and how we can improve those services so that we can effectively end their homelessness and create a stability that is long-term rather than just passing. Yesenia, is there anything you want to add to Councilor Rosenthal's question around youth homelessness specifically?
Yeah, I would just add that similar to what you're describing, that is a population that can be more transient or like the data is harder to collect. But across all the KPIs that you're seeing there, that population and other populations can be further disaggregated. So for example, for shelter, there are some specific, like for the shelter providers that we do fund, they have some shelters that maybe are more focused towards youth. And some of those KPIs that you see around shelter, like utilization rates, individual serve, exits to housing, that will be data that we will be able to have in each of these KPIs for youth being served. Now I hear what you're describing, which is really like, it is a harder population to be served. It requires more intentional service programming. And I think that that's something that our implementing partners are further working out with their service providers to really understand what are the most successful traits of a program in order to serve that population.
Okay. Yeah, success is a lot harder to define with that group because you don't move them into housing and then track them in that housing, that rental unit for 3 years. Thank you.
All right, so we're seeing for questions on this item. We'll move on to the next one. Actually, I think you might want to just stay and hang out.
Okay.
Anticipate there'll be questions for you again. But we'll move on to discussion on draft resolution number 26-5567 for the purpose of adopting oversight and accountability measures and agenda priorities for the Supportive Housing Services Regional Policy and Oversight Committee. Today, we'll continue to discuss and provide feedback on this resolution to prepare for potential adoption. We are scheduled to vote on this resolution next Thursday, March 12th. I want to thank everyone who shared feedback. You should have received edits in the last day or so with yellow highlights on the version that you gave feedback on. We were able to incorporate something from everyone. So thank you to Councilors Rosenthal, Nolan, Lewis, and the Housing Department for your thoughtful feedback. All the feedback line by line was reviewed, discussed, but ultimately not all feedback was accepted. In summary, I want to quickly note that the modifications that were incorporated by Councilor Gonzalez and I include modifications to the whereas prologue sections. We incorporated many of Councilor Rosenthal's suggestions for plain and accessible language, underscored some goals and values of the SHS program, and acknowledged uncertain federal funding. In the be it resolved clauses, some changes in the first three. First, on the regional performance metrics and dashboard, we added a desire for KEIs to include spending by population in B. I believe Councilor Nolan, you wanted to add general populations in A and B as well. We can get that added in. On the regional investment fund, we've moved
Yes, Mr. Chair, yes. That's what I raised with you. Thank you.
Okay. On the regional investment funds, we're able to move up a timeline for housing department policy recommendation and council action to end in September of 2026. That's a more ambitious timeline, asking for 2 governance models to move centralized decision-making of the RIF to Metro, and finally aiming to reaffirm the RIF to be centered on the 6 existing goals identified by the TCPB. And that's thanks to Councilor Lewis for your work on this section. And then lastly, on the regional continuous improvement framework from Councilor Rosenthal, we added language that gives responsibility to RPOC to self-assess its own structure and performance at the 2-year mark of the committee. So colleagues, happy to open the floor for continued discussion and feedback. There's a lot in this resolution that directs natural staff. And of course, there are things not in here that are important to us, but we did our best to find consensus where possible. And yeah, I just wanted to open up for more conversation and feedback. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Deputy President Wong. Well, first, I just want to thank you for your hard work, because I mean, this has really been so much dedication from you to synthesize. And I just wanted to like try and I want to capture the kind of the leadership that you took in a bottle here and see if we can repackage it and like clone it and duplicate it. So this is just for, I want to park it in our council kind of procedures and practices that we've been talking about. And as we look to have future council retreats, like I think this is really a great way to synthesize and report back. I heard your feedback. This is how I'm changing it in the resolution, in the language, kind of nodding to people in that sense. And I don't think we do enough of this, and I would like for us to have more of it in terms of our policy making and how we do that. So I just want to park that with whoever is here from the council office as we're thinking to standardize some of those practices, because I would like to see this format kind of move forward. And also, obviously, thank you everyone for contributing and helping to strengthen this policy. I feel like it's a lot stronger thanks to your contributions. Thank you.
And thanks to the council staff who worked really hard in the housing department as well. It's been a team effort across many departments and many council offices. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I think of this resolution as a follow-up, obviously, to the work that we did at the end of the year. And I don't think it's our last follow-up to that reform work. But I think what it does is it actually lays out clearly from our policymaking level, our expectations that are not just assumed in a work plan or assumed because of current practice. And for me, that really rises when I look at the section of edits around the RIF. And yes, it's an ambitious timeline that by September of this year, we are going to have a recommendation of at least 2 directions we could go in regaining control of the one thing that was supposed to be ours of all of this. My hope would be that we follow this resolution with others where we are making targeted statements, investments, and outcome-based statements about what it is we are trying to achieve through all of this work. We are, yes, leaning in heavily to our role as convener and policymaker and funder. But we cannot continue to wear all three hats at once. We have to take one off and put another one on. And we are a funder that has expectations because the voters, the payers of this expect things. And so it is on us to sometimes take off our convening hat and use resolutions like this to force decisions that otherwise we could convene till we're blue in the face. And that is why I'm supporting this and hopefully some future resolutions.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, additional questions? Okay, well, again, I want to thank everyone for your feedback. I think we generated a lot of discussion and, hopefully we'll have more to follow, but I do think this sets us on the right kind of pathway to bring, the RIF back, to work on continued improvement, to work on our KPIs and, hold necessary parties accountable. So thank you all. We'll bring this back on March 12th for final discussion and votes. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please reach out to our staff and Kristen. And I want to thank Yesenia and Liam for sticking around. Okay, we'll move on then to COO Communications. COO Madrigal.
Thank you. Just a couple things today. I hope everyone can take a few minutes to stop into MRC 228 to see the work in progress as the Future Visions Artist Residency works are created in real time. Our artist cohort, Jenny Green Miller, Jessica Lagunas, Barbara Lima, and Dee Dee Weiss will be creating their works from 9 to 4 today and tomorrow. And there will be a final presentation and discussion of the works on March 5th at 1 p.m. directly after council. I'm excited to see the amazing new art that's going to be created here at MRC. And then lastly, if the news lately has been getting you down, there's a way to get out in nature and away from screens for a bit. There is a winter nature park and waterfowl watching excursion at Killen Wetlands Nature Park on Friday, March 6th from 10 to 12. Local educator and biologist Anna Lee will be covering some birding basics for attendees. It's free to attend, but advanced registration is required. So there's more information at oregonmetro.gov/events. Put your feet in the grass. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Communications. Councilor Lewis.
Sure. I attended the Region 1 Act last night. I think it is important for folks to know that the R1 Act, along with all of the other acts, are being asked for project lists for the ODOT's new CIP process. The original list request was 5 projects. Those 5 projects have been established for the region. None of them would be a surprise. It includes everything from the Interstate Bridge to Sunrise to TV Highway. There is now a second ask for an additional 10 projects. Colleagues, I think it is really important you know that there was a vote last night that the projects that had been brought forward into the discussion last night are going to be the only projects considered. There were 3 of us who voted no to essentially keep the project list open until we have another meeting. Last night was discussion item only. Next meeting will be the vote. But there are going to be no additional projects introduced into that discussion. So you may have a jurisdiction that was hoping to get a project on that list, but that is now closed. That said, I do think the regional, our part of the region approach might be to focus on program-based priorities, such as paving, such as CBOS, such as arterial, such as jurisdictional transfer safety hotspots, and not more projects. But I just wanted everybody to know that meeting happened and that decision to close the project portal has closed.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Wanted to let people know that the RWAC met last week. Focused its discussion on the draft designs for Cornelius Recycling Depot and giving feedback to WPEZ on that. And also on finalizing recommendations that will come to council on facility plan priorities and goals and language. We should be, I don't know the exact date for that to come forward, but it should be sometime in the next few weeks.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, seeing no further discussion, the council meeting is adjourned. However, council will meet in executive session in room 375 in about 5 minutes. Part 1 of the executive session will be held pursuant to ORS 192.6602F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection, and 2E to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transaction. Only members of the news media and designated staff will be allowed to attend part 1 of the executive session. If you are a member of the news media and wish to attend the executive session, please call or email the legislative coordinator at least 24 hours before the notice to meeting at legislativecoordinator@oregonmetro.gov or 503-797-1916. Representatives of the news media and all other attendees are specifically directed to not disclose information that is subject of the executive session. Part 2 of the executive session will be held pursuant to ORS 192.6602D to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. Representatives of the news media are excluded from this portion of the meeting. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for March 5th at 10:30 a.m.